a suit and tie and get your hair cut way up high. Get yourself a lawyer, son. You're gonna need a real good one.
Oh, we're grappling with the headphones here. Jules, we might need your help in here, I think, because they're causing us all sorts of problems, and we'd love David Whiting to hear properly. David, good morning.
Good morning, Virginia.
While we get your headphones problem...
No, I'm using someone else's. It's okay.
No, but it's very tight there. You'll get yourself into tangled trouble. While that's being fixed, I'll read out this text message from Will, 1300 222 774. David Whiting has some homework to go through. They're all twisted up there, Jules. And we'll get through the homework and then we'll answer your questions. But this is what one of our listeners has to say to me. It's a bit of advice for me this morning, David.
Okay.
Triola, you're such an agony aunt. I'm not sure what that means. When David Whiting comes on, can you just keep quiet and let the expert talk?
Oh, wow.
Much better to keep your mouth shut and be
tell my
thought
wife
of a
not
fool
to send these things in.
than to open it and remove all doubt. Stop pretending you're the font of all legal knowledge. Well, Will, if you even thought that I was pretending to be not even the font, but maybe even the trickle of legal knowledge, then more fool you, because I've never, ever presented myself that way. But, David, as you and I understand, we talk here. It's two of us sitting here. It's the show that I host, but also from time to time, with the legal issues that you get, as we've well established, sometimes it's a broader discussion about manners or about intra-family and intrapersonal dilemmas and discussions. It's not always legal.
The biggest problem from my point of view is that you identify with the client. How do you solve the client's problem as opposed to the problem that it comes out of?
That's right.
Yes, very.
Yeah, it's a broader discussion.
Look, I like to say, if you weren't there, I wouldn't be here.
That's right. So won't be keeping my mouth shut, but all the legal advice, of course, comes from David. David, what's the homework?
The homework was from a couple of weeks ago, because we had that beautifully short week with a morning day and a football day.
Yes, that's right.
So James from Eltham had an issue with a tree where council told him to move the house, keep the tree. There is a provision in the Nullenbuck tree preservation policy. He simply applies for a planning permit. He'll likely get a permit to trim or remove the tree.
Why do you say likely get it?
Well, it's always a discretion. There's no as of right. You can make an application to council. So you apply for a planning permit to do something to the tree, maybe to trim it or to pull it out. In the event that you don't get the answer that you want from council, you can have their decision reviewed at VCAT by applying for a planning permit.
Okay.
The second one was Cecilia, who is born overseas, has a husband who lives overseas, and her problem is that the overseas assets that she owns and her husband's income are being included in her application for an age pension. And the answer is, yep, that's right. So your overseas assets. So if you are a couple, then your assets, wherever they happen to be, and your income, wherever it is derived from, is included for the purpose of assessing your pension entitlement.
Yeah, it's unavoidable, that one, isn't it?
Well, there's also a touch of equity in it. You're a couple. I mean, it's kind of say, well, I don't live in the same town as you, therefore my pension shouldn't be income shouldn't be included. And Leanne had an issue at VCAT with a delay on an application that she lodged on the 22nd of December, whereas ones lodged subsequently have been processed. What she needs to do is talk to the friend or colleague who had the later lodged application, which is resolved, and write to the registrar at VCAT and give both her application number and the other application number and ask why so long.
1300 222 774. Ethan in Mentone is saying VT, the suppository of all legal wisdom. I'd say the suppository of all illegal wisdom might be a little better, don't you think? Where shall we start? What about Michael in Colac? Michael, good morning. Go ahead.
Thank you, Virginia. David, we are leasing a tract of land from a government department, and on that land there are a number of large trees. Some of them 60 to 100 feet tall.
Yes.
Who owns the trees?
Well, there's no way knowing they're leasehold improvements. You haven't been renting it for 100 years, have you?
No.
So the trees definitely belong to the owner of the land. Okay. And if you look at the lease, there's probably significant restrictions on you doing anything to the land without their permission.
Right. So who's responsible for looking after the trees?
look at your lease. Their lease will give you that answer. It may be that you're not required to do anything in relation to them. Your lease is probably in negative terms and not do anything that would damage them.
Is there a problem you're trying to solve here, Michael, in relation to the trees?
Yes, some are dead and dangerous. They've been assessed by arborists.
Yes.
And we've been told they have to come down.
Well, again, Michael, do you live on is it a property or is it a suburban block or is it... So that the general proposition would be you would ask if it's unsafe and it's a residential tenancy, you would say to the Housing Commission or the Minister, I want it pulled down. If it's a commercial rent, you go to the landlord, and it may even be a residential tenancy issue that you could take to VCAT on the basis that the premises aren't safe. But if you've got acres and acres, then you look at the lease, and again, it may be that you've got a problem where the landlord's got something on the property which is unsafe for the occupants.
It is land within a recreation reserve, and we leased it from the manager of the recreation reserve, but that lease is also attested to by the government department.
Okay, so it's you've rented it from the Committee of Management with the consent of the government department.
Correct.
The Committee of Management has obligations under its occupancy rights or management rights to make sure that the property remains safe. Committee of Management is the people you talk to.
So you haven't let them know yet about the unsafe assessment, Michael?
Well, they had the arborists check the trees.
They did it themselves, right? So
Yeah.
they know.
So I would be having a look at the rights or the obligations that the Committee of Management picked up when they took control of the location from the government department that owns it.
Okay, Michael, hope that's helpful. Thanks for calling in. 1300 222 774. Hillary in Bacchus Marsh. How can David help?
Hello, David. Thank you for taking my call. I've recently discovered some female relatives of mine who are buried in the Ballarat cemetery. I'm wondering, how do I find out who paid for their burials, please?
You could ask the whoever is the entity that controls the cemetery. They should be able to tell you. Do you want to know who paid for their burials or who controls the grave? Which is it?
Because I'm a direct descendant, I would like to have a grave memorial and a ceremony at the grave, but I don't want to go stepping on people's toes that I don't know exist.
Well, you'll be stepping on the toes of the people in the grave, won't you, Hillary?
David.
Well, hopefully not, David. Thank you very much.
Hillary, I would be doing a little bit of probate work, probably Public Records Victoria, prov.vic.gov.au. I would be searching for death records. That will give you a little bit more information about the person who's in the grave. And that might give you what you want. I can't imagine that the people who run the cemetery will have a receipt for an ancestor. But
I have spoken with them and
Yes.
they don't know who paid for the grave or the burial costs.
No, I can understand that. They probably wouldn't. If you wanted to know what the burial costs were, you can search.
I know what they were.
Okay.
I know what they were. I'm just
who paid. Yeah.
Who paid?
So what you would need to do is no one will have records as to who paid, and you'll need to track through probate records to see who controls the right of burial.
Right.
And they're the people, and you need to go then back to the cemetery people and say, I've established that this person has the right to give me the permission. Here it is.
All right. Okay,
Well,
Hillary, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for calling in. Louise in Croydon. Good morning. What's your question? Hi, Louise. Are you there?
Yes, hello, Virginia. Thank you for taking my call. Hello, David.
Hello.
I have a retaining wall issue, and I would like to know if there is any recourse for the neighbour to contribute to the cost of a retaining wall on our boundary where one ought to be.
Why do you need a retaining wall?
Well, we moved into the house 8 years ago and the boundary was covered in ivy. We pulled the ivy down and we found that the neighbouring block was completely unretained, 19 metres long, 1.6 metres high. Their earth is
the
not
answer
stable.
to your question, Louise, is that it's defined as being ancillary work on a fencing issue.
Yep.
So what you're doing is you're saying, I want the boundary to be fenced or be fenced in a particular way, and that would include, I imagine, a retaining wall.
Yes.
And then part of the issue, though, Louise, is who cut. Because what you're describing to me is that it's your predecessor in title who dug away. So I'm not saying that your neighbour won't be required to contribute to the cost of the retaining wall. I just can't say in what proportions.
Well, we've done our homework and we know that there was some cut on our side in the 1970s and there was some fill on the neighbour side in the 1990s. And we had an independent engineer come out and say, look, the only reason a retaining wall is required is due to the amount of fill on the neighbouring property.
Then we spent a year in the Magistrates Court resolving a similar issue.
Really?
About who contributed. And yes, you can get the neighbour to contribute before the acts of their predecessor.
Okay, thank you.
But it's it's an application of the Fencing Act.
Something you've got to get onto, though, isn't it? Louise, thank you for calling in. That's a huge dilemma. That would worry me.
Well, we haven't asked how high the retaining wall needs to be, but can you imagine the amount of foundations you need for a good, solid retaining wall?
I think you said it was 1.6 at the moment. Is that right?
It's 19 metres long.
Yeah.
How high is
19 metres long, so 1.6 metres high, and we were told we would need steel posts 5 metres in length into the ground to hold it up. It's going to be a big
massive
job.
Yeah,
it's going to be huge. Good luck, Louise.
Good luck. Very important nonetheless. Louise in Hurstbridge. What's the problem, Louise? Good morning.
Oh, is that Hurstbridge, Louise?
That's you. Go ahead. You're on the air.
Okay. I live in a rural property and I bought it 35 years ago, and along the inside of the boundary fence that's adjacent to the road, parallel with the road, was an easement. In the easement are some water pipes under the ground that supply neighbours up the road, several hundred metres up the road.
Yes.
Anyway, where the pipes are on my land, if you like, my easement, it leaks a lot. And we ring Yarra Water and they say, we don't have a record of an easement, or we don't do easements anymore, or it's like the history's been lost and the water pipes are leaking, and the Yarra says it's on your land. And I say, well, actually,
Louise, the responsibility lies with the person who owns the infrastructure. Now, a title search for your property will tell you whether the easement is in favour of Yarra Valley Water, in which case it's their problem, or whether the easement is the benefit of the easement is owned by the people who live up the road. So if it's the people who live up the road, it's their issue. If it's Yarra Valley Water that owns the infrastructure, it's their issue. But a title search will tell you whose it is.
Can I just do a title search?
Yes, you can.
Oh, do you mind telling me how I do that?
Serv, SERVIC, servic.com.au.
And what do you do? How do you actually look? You just type in the address.
Well, you type in the email, and then you'll do a title search based on the address.
Yep.
And then you can get a copy of the title and a copy of the title plan, and the title plan will indicate who owns the easement.
Good luck, Louise. I hope that helps. It sounds like a really worrying situation. Jim in Northcote. Jim, how can David Whiting help?
Yes, look, I'm calling for my aged mother. What happened was the roof leaked and the water came down the wall, and we applied to the insurance company to get the wall repainted. The insurance company said they wouldn't pay us to get the wall repainted until we got the roof fixed. We got a quote for the roof, which was about $5,000 to $8,000. I got up onto the roof, there's a sunlight up there, and put some flashing around the sunlight and fixed the leak.
Oh, Jim, that's plumbing work. That's against the law.
What's that? Just putting some flashing around?
Absolutely. You're not allowed to do that. Yes. But keep going.
Why is that?
Well, because it's against the law.
What, to put flashing on your roof?
To do work on your roof, yes.
Got to be a certified plumber to be able
Yes.
to do that.
Don't worry.
Really?
Well, let's move on from that. Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, what I thought was surely they can say pay for the wall to be fixed, but say we won't fix the wall in future unless you get the roof fixed. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
I can understand. Yes, I can see the logic in your argument. However, if I was the insurance company, I'd want to make sure that I would hate to put on your file, whatever you do, don't take an insurance claim from Jim because he's already been paid to paint the wall once. Most insurance companies will say if it's an issue that's causing the problem and they're not responsible to make good on that problem, they will tell you to fix your issue first.
So it's all right for them to do that?
Yes.
Okay, that's all I need to know. Thank you.
All right, good on you, Jim. Hope that goes well. That's your daily reminder, everyone, not to do stuff that legally has to be done by somebody else.
Who has qualifications that you don't have.
Such as an electrician.
Yes.
Not allowed to fix your own fuse box,
There
right?
was a time you weren't allowed to change light globes, but never mind. Yep.
When was that time?
I think that changed 5 or 6 years ago.
What, excuse me, your own globe in a lamp or something?
Oh, look, just don't tell me how many times you've broken the law, but there was a point at which you couldn't do any electrical work.
Sorry, someone's signalling something to me. What are they signalling? Thank you very much. Joe in Bentley, good morning.
Good morning. I do have a quick query. A couple of weeks ago, I did something rather stupid. I was urinating in public and got caught by an officer.
Yes.
You did it in front of a copper.
I didn't know he was there.
Stop. This is going to be a case of Virginia interfering, and I'm sorry, I'm not apologising for that. Circumstance, where, when, what? Tell us everything.
I couldn't find a toilet. I was...
Time of the day?
At a bar. This is midnight. Off Chapel Street I feel like every male's kind of gone through this. But I was caught, and it was a silly thing, and in hindsight, it was definitely very naive. A week later, I received an infringement notice. The charge was behaving in a righteous, indecent, offensive, or insulting manner. The penalty is $740.
Yep.
The problem with that is...
your line is terrible, Joe.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's not your fault. Joe, what shall we do, Jules?
Well, why don't I'll give Joe the answer next week. It's the
you
note
don't know
on the
the
screen
answer to
says...
this one? Come on.
Well, no, it won't appear in his record, which is his question.
Right.
It depends on what he's applying for, but it's a general proposition. It won't be on his record.
Was that
his
the question,
worry.
Joe?
Yeah, that was the question.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
It is tricky. There aren't many public toilets these days.
No, but there's nothing more... When you're walking down the street and you can see there are doorways where someone...
I know,
and you just think,
It's,
yuck.
it's terribly unpleasant. Is Joe's line still terrible? Because I did want to ask him what the copper said. What did the person say to you, Joe?
There wasn't much of a discussion. He just asked to see my licence.
Right, okay. I was wondering if there was maybe some bon mot that might have been dropped in that moment, or some wry observation. Joe, don't do it again. No one should do it. Joan in Castlemaine. Hello, Castlemaine, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Joan.
Yeah, hi. I've got an issue where my current neighbour, or the previous neighbour, planted 4 potentially extremely large gum trees adjacent to our common fence, which is the northerly aspect to my back garden. And one of them, probably in 15 years, will actually push the fence over.
Yes.
But they're going to totally shade half of my garden where I'm growing veggies and scavenge all the water from under the, soil. So I'm wondering, another issue is that probably a year ago I had a disagreement with this neighbour, so I'm not on speaking terms with them anymore. So I wondered if there is anything I can do, or if there's nothing I can do.
Well, let's deal your neighbour is required to keep his or her trees on his or her side of the fence, and that's above the ground and below the ground. You don't own the you've got no right to light or air from your neighbour.
Right, really?
Yeah, so you can't come along and say, you've put those trees there, it's ruining my view and I can't get the suntan I used to get. That doesn't work. Your argument becomes that your roots are encroaching into my property I want you to remove them. That's the way you would phrase the argument. So he's got to keep his trees on his side of the fence.
Right. Okay. Well, that's interesting. But I mean, they've only recently grown a lot, so I've only noticed them since they got higher than the fence. So it's going to be some years before the actual roots.
But until then, it's not a problem.
No, it's not a problem.
So when it becomes a problem, you have a cause of action. Yep.
Okay, so
Yes.
the roots.
Yes.
Okay, well, thanks very much for that advice.
Good luck. Thanks, Jane.
Thank you very much. I think we can fit in. Yeah, we can fit in one more. Oh, where shall we go? Here we go. Peter in the Otways. Peter, what's going on? Good morning.
Good morning. I've got an issue in relation to medicinal cannabis and the road rules. I lost my licence for 2 years as a result of being caught with THC in my system.
Yes.
I was following the government guidelines as to when you can drive and can't drive in relation to having taken cannabis. Those guidelines are incorrect. But my issue at the moment is before I get my licence back, I have to pay $750 and do an intensive alcohol and drug behavioural change program.
Yes.
I don't drink. I don't take recreational drugs. I just take my medicinal cannabis when appropriate. I mostly take CBD oil, which is okay, but occasionally when I get intense pain, I take THC.
Peter, it's a gap in the law that they talked to. There were some articles in this in the paper in the last week, and that is that the evidence is that trace elements of THC remain in your blood, so they're able to tell that it's there. What they can't do is tell how much of it's there.
Yes.
So if you think of alcohol, we know that it leaves your body at a particular rate, or fairly close to a particular rate. On the THC stuff, we know it's there, we just don't know how much. So, there are lots of suggestions. There were some suggestions that people in the country who've been prescribed medicinal cannabis are not taking it because they're worried about getting a loss of a driver's licence. So the answer would be yes, there's a problem in the law, but you have to. That's what you need to do to get it back.
Well, okay. I've been trying to see the Attorney General or discuss this matter with the Attorney General for the past 6 months.
I'm sure you have.
I've had no success.
No,
They've handballed me to the police minister. They handballed me back to the thing. Well, what's the point of the law? I was not impaired in any way, shape or form. I've got that from the police on record. I used to teach road safety on behalf of Victoria Police and the Education Department.
Peter, what you've got to do is you've got to establish for the benefit of the Attorney General and for the Health Department, I would imagine, is there needs to be some way of measuring the concentration of THC in your system, and then we need to come up with a system that says at that level it is not impairing what you're doing.
Are you aware that there are any discussions underway about that? Is it up for review?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
No. Okay. Is there any way that Peter can bring some pressure to bear to get that under review?
I think then I'm not sure that there's any evidence out there as to what level has an impact on your driving. I mean, it's like the old sobriety tests. You pass a sobriety test. It's not the same. So we've formalised it and said if you've got this concentration of alcohol, and it's clear to me that a racing car driver will drive better with some alcohol than I ever would sober.
I guess maybe you can go and have a conversation with one of the lobby groups that are lobbying, for the legalisation of cannabis. They might have some, be putting together some discussion about it.
That's where the process starts, and they'll be better connected for connection. They'll be better connected than anyone else.
David, this has come in on text. It turns out that between public urination, changing my light bulbs and fixing the guttering, I should be texting this from one of His Majesty's more secure facilities right now.
Well, we know that's wrong because you wouldn't have access to a mobile phone lawfully.
Yeah, but this guy's clearly a renegade.
Absolutely.
I mean, he would, or she would, indeed. Look, all the listeners, you're all outrageous. You're all descendants of, bushrangers. So what can we say? You run your own race, and I must say that I quite like that.